Wow. We'll get Oana and Damir a little bit later. We'll get you guys going and make sure that you're getting out to lunch. So welcome to How About the Truth? Democracy under the siege, under siege in the age of disinformation. I will be serving as your moderator. My name is Matt Jacobs, and I have had the good fortune of serving as a public affairs and public diplomacy official in the age of digital communications and overseeing the policy and practice development for the formerly for the U.S. government's efforts to communicate with foreign audiences in Europe. And within this period, I was fortunate enough to experience that kind of digital utopia when we all thought that these digital communication devices were going to be able to enable us to connect with foreign publics, domestic publics, in ways that were previously unimaginable, bringing us all together closer, bringing us more connected, making us more informed. Of course, that also means, because we're here and we're discussing a particular subject, that I was here for when all that optimism turned into a bit of pessimism, when all those opportunities turned into challenges, particularly as we saw that these very tools that we were relying on to help bolster our democracies and build our connections with one another were quickly turned into something that could do the exact opposite, something that could divide us, something that could make us foster less trust, less resilience. And when we saw the very institutions that were looking to leverage these tools become seen as less favorable in the eyes of the public, the more and more we use them. And as a result, we saw an erosion of trust in these very government institutions and civil societies, and particularly and perhaps even most concerningly, between citizens themselves. Of course, this is deleterious for all of us because we rely on information given to us by governments. We rely on community fostered through civil society organizations, and we rely on dialogue between citizens to advance our democracies, to allow our democracies to prosper and grow and succeed. So of course, this is not just a challenge of information. This is not just a challenge of how do we build relationships with people. This is a challenge of how do we ensure that our democracies survive and thrive in the coming era. Now, because this is something that requires an impact, or rather impacts the whole of society, we need to be thinking about a whole society approach. And today we have convened representatives from across various different sectors who play a very important role in this space, whether that be in government, whether that be in academia, whether that be in civil society, for a conversation about what have we done, why have we done it, what haven't we done, and what must we do to keep this, ensure that we are maintaining a healthy and productive digital information environment where we can engage and where our citizens can thrive. So we do have a limited time, so I'm not going to go through and introduce my panelists next to me one by one, but I am going to allow them to tell you how their work is impacting what they're doing. So, panelists, we're going to get to our first question. So before we begin with your sector-specific questions, I want to ask you, why is it that disinformation is such a topic of significant interest? And why is it that disinformation is viewed as having such a corrosive impact on public trust, whether that be through institutional leaders or whether that be amongst members of the common public themselves? And what do you see as your role through your work in seeking to either identify, understand, undercut, or address this phenomena? And I want to start with you, Deputy Foreign Minister Bosacki.
Good morning.
Okay. I got you.
Listen, who remembers what anniversary was yesterday? The beginning of the Second World War, 1st of September. For Poland, this is absolutely a crucial anniversary. In Polish internet, one news spread out with the speed of fire, which was the laying of the RAF in Berlin under the monument to commemorate Polish victims of World War II in Berlin. And the guy who was laying the RAF was wearing shirts and was very not looking officially. And the RAF, in a separate photo, showed Bundesregierung Deutschland, so the government of Germany. It was a fake. The official ceremony took place 2 hours later. That was probably some Boy Scout, and he was not laying an official RAF. But in Poland, it reached 3 million users until yesterday evening, probably twice as much until today's morning. And it was used as a symbol of Germany humiliating Poland again, 86 years after the beginning of World War II. It was spread by far-right, not only far, but right-wing accounts, including former ministers. We don't know yet who originated that. It could have been domestic, it could have been foreign, namely Russia, but we don't know it yet. It's a great example of what you just said, Matt, that the goal of disinformation in the internet is to sow division within societies, but also between nations. And in case of Poland, this is mainly Russia and Belarus who are sowing this disinformation and distrust, mainly between Poles and Germans and Poles and Ukrainians. What do we do? First, we really started to coordinate work between government agencies. Ministry of Digitalization, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Special Services. We created something which we called Council of Resilience, which consists of experts from these institutions, but also from NGOs, academia, and local governments. And we try to expose this kind of lies as soon as possible. This is what we can do. Secondly, and this is nothing new, but we put emphasis now into what's going on in the net. During election campaign, we do have a law which requires courts to judge cases of manipulation or false information during election campaigns within 48 hours. For example, former Polish Prime Minister, Mr. Morawiecki, was sentenced twice as a liar because of that. Once in a case of spreading manipulation in the internet. Is what I just started to describe efficient and enough? No. Is it important and good first steps? Another one is probably Mr. Grzegorzewski will say much more about it. The sharing of information between our nations. These are good first steps. I'm having a trust, contrary to many panels yesterday, that we can and we must deal with this huge problem effectively, and I'm sure we have a strength and will to do it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Deputy Foreign Minister. Actually, you mentioned going over to Filip, but I want to pass this over to someone who I think will have a very similar viewpoint, and that is Petra Bezjak-Cirman, who is the Director of Communications for the Government Communication Agency of our lovely host, the Government of Slovenia. Petra, would you mind answering the question?
So I think that FINI, foreign information manipulation and interference, is not new, but an old phenomenon, but the difference is the techniques that are used today. So it spreads really fast and uses AI technology to be more reliable and uses our own domestic language. So this is the difference, because we are afraid if our language is used and think that this might come from our own people, but many times it doesn't. So I think that with FIMI, the external actor tries to divide our democracy and our society. And me, as a citizen and a voter that will have an election next year, I want to know who is behind those fake profiles, fake websites. I want to know if they are paid for that. I want to know why social media companies are letting them to advertise that kind of words and thoughts. And I want to know the origin of this false information. Is it domestic or is it foreign? Yesterday I talked with State Secretary, and we are seeing that the same profiles are used for Poland, for Czech Republic, and for Slovenia, using AI technology, and they have many likes of Slovenian audience. And I think we should have a legislation on our own domestic country and on European level to prevent this. So in our country, I think we have to do more on monitoring these attempts, because if there's an intruder in your house, you act. You call the police. If there's an intruder in our digital borderless space, we don't do anything. So for every government, I think it's a really important first step to recognize that FIMI is a matter of national security. This government done this in 2023 when we established a disinformation working group within the Slovenian National Security Council Secretariat, and I'm leading it, and I'm really honored to do that. So second of all, I think that each government should educate their own people and invest in digital and media literacy. We have to build awareness and resilience among citizens. People need to know by themselves who is a reliable source. They have to fact-check information on digital space. So we prepared last year a campaign under the slogan, Stop Disinformation, Reread, Rethink, Recheck, but that is not enough. We have to start in kindergarten, in schools, because children are born with mobiles and this borderless digital space. And that leads us to next task, creating the right conditions for trusted independent media to be fact-checkers. The government should not be a fact-checker, the government should not violate freedom of speech, but it should monitor digital space. And the third, every government should gain public trust. So our actions should be toward it. As our government communication office, we represent the work of government transparently. We inform people what we are doing, and we try to gain trust of people that we are on the right side of the history.
All right, thank you, Petra. So I heard this is the second time I've been thinking that we might have to go out of order and go over to you, Filip, because we're talking about European-level legislation, and as Petra pointed out, that we're seeing certain fake accounts going all across the European Union. So with your position in the EU External Action Service working on this issue, how do you see this?
Thank you, Matt. I'm really honored and excited to be here. I have to say it because, well, the room is full. Everyone is interested in FIMI, in disinformation, and what we actually can do about it. So, if you allow me, I would like to make 3 points. One, on the implications of the great power rivalry now on this post-truth age. You called it here the age of disinformation, but I'd like to rephrase it a bit. Then the second point that I would like to make is on FIMI. On what FIMI actually is, how it differs from misinformation, disinformation, fake news, however you call it. And the final point I would like to make about what we do about it. So getting back to your initial question. And the measure of my success will be whether you leave the room slightly more optimistic. So test me on that. And I'm grateful to Minister Bosacki for starting with a very concrete example of a case happening as we now speak, because it gives us a real connection with reality. We are in now a phase in international relations where we are back to sort of Cold War dynamics. but it's influenced now by the technology, by the fact that we all use social media, that we all remain in the information bubbles, and democracy is shaped not really but by what's happening in rooms like that, although I would like it to be the case, but what's happening on social media. That's bad, but that's the reality. We have tools to deal with that. So within the European Extraction Service, we coined a term, FIMI, Foreign Information Manipulation and Interference. The name is not too sexy, but it helps us to focus the attention on a very specific part of disinformation problem, which is that it's coming from the outside, that there is an external actor, an external threat actor doing malign things to us from the outside. Those things, those actions can be legal or illegal. They can be also performed on behalf of those external threat actors by people already within our systems, by proxies. So it's very complicated and difficult to pinpoint the responsibility. As Minister Bosacki just gave us that example, it shows clearly that it's not easy. So what can we do about that? Well, I'll give you two very concrete flagship projects that we run within the European Extraction Service. One is RAS. Have you ever heard about RAS? I saw some colleagues from the group, so they do know what it is. RAS, Rapid Alert System, is a network that we as the EAS run, manage, facilitate, but it's a community bringing together all the member states, experts in the field of disinformation, data analysts, who exchange information on daily basis on cases, on very concrete cases. So when there is a website that is spotted in Slovenia spreading disinformation, or there is a specific case, or a network amplifying disinformation, as Mr. Bosacki mentioned, in Poland, then this signal is immediately transferred to all the member states of the European Union, so that we can take action, so that Slovenia can mobilize their authorities to take action. That's a bit of an ideal world, but but this is how we want it to work, and we are on the right way to achieving that. So Rapid Alert System is one very concrete flagship project case of what we do about disinformation, about fighting disinformation in Europe. And another one is EU versus Disinfo. Have you heard about EU versus Disinfo?
Mm-hmm. We are translating it.
Yes, and thank you for mentioning that. EU versus Disinfo is a portal run by the EAS. I'm very proud of my team. We have been doing it over the last 10 years. So it started after the Russian invasion of Crimea. And it's being translated, the articles there are being translated into 14 languages, including Russian.
Last year it was only 5.
Last year it was 5.
Yeah, we were the first that pushed the others.
Are you alluding to the fact that I've been in the job for 1 year? Thank you. No, it's 14 languages now. 38 million people visited the channels that we run also on social media. We're using AI there. If you're curious, you can listen to podcasts that are run by AI. So we're trying to make it attractive and to reach out to people in order to increase awareness, to strengthen our ability to spot and to detect and then to counter disinformation. And we are not alone. We are a huge community. of people looking at the problem from different perspectives, from communication, intelligence, security. And my impression is that we are not only getting better and better at that, but it's quite efficient. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Philip. So, of course, we've been hearing from our government colleagues, but I think it's time to move on to a few additional sectors. So, Alicia, would you mind taking a crack at the question?
I feel like I'm going to be a bit of an outlier.
That's why you're on the very end of the stage.
Yeah, I feel it. So before I get into it, despite there being such a focus on disinformation since 2016, this is really not a new phenomenon. You can go back to the Peloponnesian War in the 5th century BC and see that Thucydides was complaining how many people would just believe the first story that came their way about Sparta and Athens. There were rumors about the well being poisoned once everybody was put behind the defensive lines, and you see it in satire, in plays, where people were mocking Pericles, among others. And you also have a history of people griping about the latest technology, because in this period you also have Socrates complaining about the written word. So these things tend to repeat. That said, I do think that disinformation is problematic, and why it is so challenging is because it cleaves society into groups of people who no longer have a shared worldview. And that makes compromise really difficult if people don't actually see the world the same. But that's absolutely needed for democracy, so there's the challenge. And this is something that we saw quite acutely in my home country of Canada during the pandemic, where people turned their backs on science and doctors and vaccines. And this was aggravated by countermeasures to encourage people to take up vaccines, to introduce vaccine passports and lockdown measures. And I don't have to tell this room that that's a policy nightmare, because how do you find compromise when maybe a quarter of your population thinks that vaccines are a conspiracy and scientists are telling you that this is the only way or the fastest way out of a pandemic? And I get it, it's scary, and I understand why policy tends to be focused very directly, headlong on tackling disinformation, because that seems to be the problem. So there's lots of fact-checking, lots of media literacy, lots of tracking, but these are really tactical. It's a very reactive approach to dealing with the problem, and it doesn't actually address the underlying conditions, like a pandemic, that might be making people more susceptible to this. And I'm afraid that this is a pattern that we're going to repeat, again, with AI slop, where we try to deal with it headlong and not necessarily understand the space where this is happening. So you asked what people see their roles as being. I'd say my role is to not do anything about disinformation, which is why I think I'm an outlier. My work is mostly framed on understanding the information environment, so the space where information exists, and within that space, how information ecosystems form. And they form by people like us using tools and technology to create outputs that we share with each other. And these ecosystems are also affected by surrounding conditions, like economy, like education, social programs, et cetera. Now, what our work does is we try to help leaders understand their national information ecosystem such that they can be more strategic in addressing the problems within it. I can tell you more about information ecosystems, but I think I'll wait.
All right. Well, I just want to say, Socrates did fear that the written word would make us all dumber, if only he knew what we'd be discussing today. So, of course, now, Michaela, would you have an opportunity to answer the question?
Answering the question, I wanted to share an experience. Actually, I wanted to share an experience with you. Yesterday, when I went to the Rickley Hotel for the accreditation, there was a young woman sitting behind the accreditation desk, and she looked up at me and she said, "Oh, you're from IRA, International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. It's good that you're here. I did a project with IRA in Sarajevo. It's so important, the work you do." So if you have asked yourself why IRA is an organization, an international organization dealing with Holocaust remembrance and fighting anti-Semitism and anti-Gypsyism, is represented here on a panel on disinformation, part of the answer lies in that young woman's reaction, because the Holocaust is not of the past, it matters still today. And distorting the facts about the Holocaust disinformation about the Holocaust undermines the very conditions that democracies rely upon, and that is a shared understanding that equality, that the rule of law, that the respect for human rights really matter. So, Holocaust distortion creates a world in which facts don't matter anymore. Facts become debatable. And where facts become debatable, trust in public institution erodes. And where trust in public institution erodes, societies trend to polarization. And where polarization grows, the door is wide open for hate to grow. And where hate grows, we have hate crimes, and we have a security issue, and that's why we're here as IRA. So my first message is, distortion undermines trust in public institutions and thus threatens democracies. My second message is, distortion is deliberate and strategic. There may be few cases where distortion is done out of ignorance, or even to advance or give weight to other political goals to underline that they are heavy crimes, so to say, like industrial farming. But what I and my organization are most worried about is deliberate and strategic Holocaust distortion, when Holocaust is chosen to advance political goals or even to make money. What do I want to say? What does that mean? So Holocaust distortion is often used to whitewash. There is a far right-wing extremist political party in Germany whose honorary chairman qualified the Holocaust, or defined the Holocaust once, as being a speck of bird shit in German history. That's outrageous. That's whitewashing. Or there are other political parties throughout Europe who minimize their country's role during the Holocaust, who minimize or deny that part of the societies in their occupied countries collaborated, or they even start to rehabilitate perpetrators of their own countries, honoring them, sometimes even glorifying them. And the most outrageous, I think, is what happened a week or so ago, what was revealed a week or so ago by the BBC. Some of you might have heard about it or seen about it. There's a guy in Pakistan who makes money out of creating false stories about the Holocaust. So the scenery was the following. He is on Facebook. He uses a Facebook tool which helps him generate stories, which helps him generate narratives, and every click brings some dollars into his wallet. And AI created for him a picture of a girl with a violin, barracks to be seen in the background, giving the impression this was a girl, and that was also what the title said, this is a girl in the Auschwitz concentration camp playing the violin. And the text explained about the girl and the history. It was all fake. Not a single word was true about it. And if you can lie about the Holocaust, the most well-documented and researched historical event ever, then you can lie about anything. So, what do we do about it? Somehow the IRA saw it coming. In 2013, 13 years after the IRA was founded, it released its first ever definition of Holocaust denial and Holocaust distortion. It's still out there in the world. It can be used because if you want to combat something, you first have to know what it is. In 2020, during the pandemic, plain pandemic, the IRA launched the Global Task Force to combat Holocaust distortion. It's still out there. The IRA launched the Protect the Facts campaign, which, with the help of the United Nations, reach about 60 million people in the world. Is it enough? No, it isn't. 60 million people are not enough. And I think it is still very necessary to be more active when it comes to digital projection of Holocaust distortion, because this is where it happens. And I'm still of a generation who grew up with papers on paper and books and a library with a Duden and a Brockhaus and you name it in it. And I learned how to, how to deal with information I got. I thought this was reliable information. But today, the youngsters who grow up today, they are exposed without limitations and without any mechanisms to find out whether something is AI or not AI generated, whether something is a lie or not a lie. And that is why I think that governments must become active. First of all, they must consider, they must judge Holocaust distortion as disinformation, and then they must combat it. And they must teach the teachers, they must teach the trainers, they must hold responsible the social media platforms, and in case there is a crime, in Germany, for instance, Holocaust distortion is a crime, then they must follow up on that crime and go to court with it. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Michaela. I want to move over to Damir. Damir, you were also on the other side of the at the end of the stage, and I know that you're going to have some interesting ideas as well. Would you mind taking a crack at the question?
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. I'd like to continue with Tukikit. I like him very much. And I will use two different quotes from our history. And the first is that all warfare is based on deception. This is the quote by Sun Tzu, a very famous person. Everybody likes to read his works and quote him. A lot of people don't understand what he was saying at that time, but now we have some kind of exact parallels into the current times. And the second one, to join the Sun Tzu with Clausewitz, who is saying that the war is a continuation of politics with other means. So when we look this from very nonsensible perspective or from distance, then we see basically that deception or disinformation, we can use it as I see that, of course, disinformation is one of the pillars of deception, is basically what is embedded into our societies. So nothing changed in this sense, unfortunately, and it's not going to change neither for the future. What changed, and when I was thinking about for this forum, what to kind of say, that it's not going to be just repeating everybody else, I remember one thing also from the past, that beforehand, before social media era, before we empowered individuals through these social means, social medias, this was basically disinformation, propaganda, deception, whatever word we are going to use, was the domain of a state. Basically, state fighting towards states, and then, of course, state addressing their own citizens through these means, through mainstream media that were in non-democratic societies under control of the state. And in democratic societies, there was a little bit more kind of freedom of speech to express this. What changed now in the last 10, 15, 20 years' time, that when malign state actors from the outside are pressing the narrative that is basically destroying the humus or compactness of the societies that my predecessors were talking about, they can use, of course, different tools they have that they didn't have before. What is the most important? They can address individuals. This was not the case in the past. Changed in 20 years' time. This empowerment of the individual brought also his exposure or her exposure to all those malign influences from the outside area. And of course, I'm now squeezing and I'm going to be very briefly. So how to tackle this? my predecessor were describing, yes, you have to have your own narratives. You have to be, you have to sustain the story that you are going to push within the society on the national level or EU level or NATO level or whatever. What are we seeing, of course, today is that within the broader frameworks, we don't have joint narratives anymore, or we have cracks within the narrative, either on the EU level or the NATO level. So this is one theory. And the second one, of course, within the internal society issues, within the internal politics, we are seeing also different kind of views how you are going to address some kind of topics. And of course, this is the problem again. But personally, what I see the biggest problems, and my predecessor mentioned this very well, that we are not at all addressing our children using TikToks, and I'm going to use TikTok, and combine TikTok with AI, and these are the most malign influences that we are having in our societies. And for example, in Slovenia, didn't have any legislation about it. But so we have to go forward on this path, and there is a lot to be done here, for sure. But I'm always going to be vocal about it, that we have to still, when we are addressing these issues, we have to have in mind that we have a special constitution article that is saying also that freedom of speech, freedom of expression is one of the foundations of free societies, of democracy. And we are not to destroy this under the kind of pretext of fighting misinformation. I think the balance here is the most important thing for the future.
Thank you, Damir. Oana, would you like to bring it home before we get to sector-specific questions?
Sure. I mean, I think the initial question was on why disinformation matters so much, and I'm happy to pick up on the issue of freedom of speech and combine it with what you were saying about trust, and propose that perhaps the title of our session should be for next year, how about trust? Because the truth is something that everyone establishes for themselves in a democracy, and that is the essence of freedom of expression. Trust, however, is something we need for our democracies to work, because the initial idea of democracy was that citizens were supposed to be able to make informed decisions, not just to make decisions. Democracy is not just about having the power to choose, it's about having the power to choose based on, number one, access to information. So to be a citizen, you were assumed to be an informed citizen, someone who could genuinely participate in the life of the city. And then secondly, to have access to debate. That's why we had the agora in ancient Greece, because people were able to debate and find common ground and find democratic consensus. And as has been outlined, that's been breaking down because people don't trust one another, let alone government institutions. So it's harder and harder to actually stay true to the essence of representative democracy, which is that I, as a citizen, delegate my vote, delegate my trust, and allow somebody else to make choices for me, my leaders, my elected representatives, because I trust them to represent me. So breaking down in information, basically, in the information space, means breaking down the essence of our democracy. Now, the other thing that I think is really important in that sense is that we focus very much on disinformation because it's the most visible part of it. But when we talk about FIMI, it is so much wider than this. And it's only yesterday that we saw, I think, an unprecedentedly serious incident with Ursula von der Leyen's plane having to use paper maps to land in Bulgaria because of apparent Russian jamming. So if that isn't serious enough to bring home the idea that it is not only that we have an information environment that is being distorted, it's the general environment around us that's being distorted. And it is being done on a grand level, and it is being done with tremendous resources. The other very serious issue that perhaps we're still shy in discussing enough because of its implications is that this is very often done through proxies. This is very often done through people within our own societies. Most of them are unwilling and unknowing collaborators. Others are willing collaborators. It is hard to fight a war when essentially you end up fighting it against your own society. And that's why the first thing we need to do is to change the framing. This is not about fighting a war with our own citizens. This is about ensuring the resilience of our societies. And when it's being done on an individual level, when that distortion is individual, that's not necessarily, I mean, that is everybody's right to freedom of speech. But when a state stands behind that, whether it coordinates the activities or it just harvests the fruit, with the resources of a state, it's genuinely the difference between individual terrorism and state terrorism. The impact is tremendous, and in my own country, in Romania, we have seen it with the annulment of a presidential election last year, because basically that is the impact you can achieve. Change the leadership of a country, which is fundamentally an anti-democratic thing to do, and change through the voting in the European Council, change the balance of power and change reality within the European Union. So again, the impact is absolutely tremendous. That is why it is much more important now than it is than it used to be in the past. And I will end by saying, in terms of what we do about it, that I have to unfortunately be a naysayer a little bit and say that regrettably, we are putting our money and our resources and our knowledge in all the wrong places. Fact-checking doesn't work. Fact-checking is an illusion. I used to be a journalist. Even at the time that we were relying on print media, we knew that if you were printing something that was false, even if the next day you were coming up with an amendment with the right version of the story, that wouldn't change a thing. It's not the same people who read. People who read don't necessarily trust it, and they trust the fact that if there was something published in the first place, then probably, there's no smoke without fire, something was there. And what worries me a lot, and with all due respect to the activity of your colleagues and yourself, I think we as the EU are doing it all wrong, because the rapid alert system is destined for governments and for experts perhaps, but it doesn't reach the people. EU versus Disinfo is a website where people who trust the EU go, because why else would you go to an EU-owned website unless you trusted the EU? Whereas Disinformation has one of its main narratives to disparage the EU, to make us not trust the EU. So the people that we're supposed to reach, we're not reaching through EU versus Disinfo. It's a very valuable website for those of us who work in the field. But what we're not doing as the EU is we're not reaching the actual people who are vulnerable to disinformation and FIMI. And the reason that is worrying is that I believe it is only the EU as a whole that can match the financial resources and the human resources that Russia, for instance, throws behind this. National governments can do as much as they can. Experts can do as much as they can. But it is only through collective action, because these narratives travel across borders anyway, that we can actually reach the impact of scale that Russia manages to reach, and other actors. And at the same time, what you don't want to do is work through centralized institutions or only through governments and so on. You need to work through the local influencers. Again, another law of communication is that if you want to reach the people, you don't try to bring them to where you are, you go where they are. So if they trust TikTok, if they trust the clergymen in a specific region or whatever, then that's the people you need to engage with. It is difficult, it's uncomfortable, and it's one of the things that I'm afraid stops us still from really taking that necessary step, because we prefer to stay in the comfortable bubble, and we prefer to take incremental measures that will only achieve incremental effect.
Thank you. I think I've looked at a number of faces that I recognize out in the audience when you said the spicy stuff that I think all of us have said at some point in our own rooms, in our own conversations. And I saw relief, 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 relief. We are going to come back to that. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Oana. But I do want to dive into something that three of us talked about. And I just have to look around to see if my former colleagues from the U.S. Embassy are here. No, they're not showing up. So yeah, they're busy. They've got someone more, another Matt who's more important, I guess. But we all saw, for our government colleagues, we all saw Vice President Vance's remarks at Munich Security Conference when it came to concerning countering disinformation. We all know where the GEC is now. It's no longer around, right? And a lot of this had to go around with the idea that countering disinformation is inherently some sort of violation of free speech, that there is no way to engage in this activity without countering free speech. Now, that might be an American perspective, absolutely, but that had significant consequences. Not only did that mean that there were certain people who, we were never part of RAS, but we were part of other things, Philip, right? Where we collaborated together. We were part of other networks. We worked together on a ton of things. And it also meant that there was a significant amount of funding and programming and citizen education and childhood education that you were mentioning, Damir, and you were mentioning, Oana. And so when we're hearing this, you know, it's not only just people at conferences who are hearing what, you know, Vance is saying at Munich Security Conference. It's citizens across the world who are hearing about this, and it's taking off as a narrative as well. So for my government colleagues, in 3 minutes or less, can you talk about more specifically the implications of why how you balance countering disinformation in order to protect a society's freedom without limiting those freedoms? And is the cost of trying to do something perhaps greater or less than the cost of inaction? And I'm going to go start with you, Philip. Yeah, I saw you. Your finger was ready. So 3 minutes or less if we can.
Cool, thanks. You couldn't be more right when you say all the things about the truth, and this is why what we really don't want to be is we don't want to be a ministry of truth. This is not what we stand for, because it's so difficult to agree among the society which truth is more true than the other, and that's the fight that if you're trying to take, you're going to lose. And I think Oana would agree with that. So instead, we need to focus on the consensus, which is around the fact that no one wants to be manipulated. Because when you can catch red-handed the perpetrator, the threat actor, doing malicious, malign things to you, when you expose those actions through information sharing. Within RAS, you mentioned other ways we cooperate with the international community. There is the G7. There is the G7 rapid reaction mechanism. There are other fora. We do things together, both with the member states of the Union and beyond, exposing manipulation, exposing interference. So it's not about truth, it's about manipulation. But I would like to return also to the point made by Oana about us being efficient or effective in dealing with disinformation or not. This is a whole of society exercise. So the EAS alone, even if my job is to convince you that we are doing really, really great, and I truly believe in that. But we are not going to win this fight alone, and we are part of a bigger ecosystem, both within the EU, within the European institutions and member states, but also the civil society, and the civil society plays a key role there. Without the civil society, we will lose. And we will now promote as the EU a new initiative that was announced by President von der Leyen, the Democracy Shield. just bringing together all the different elements that will build up on the experience of the EAS, on the FIMI toolbox, on the situational awareness, resilience building, regulation and disruption, the diplomatic actions that we take, but taking it at least one step up, bringing in all the actors that work on the issue.
Yeah, perfect. Deputy Foreign Minister, do you have any thoughts?
Definitely. Edmund Burke once said that the only thing which is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good people do nothing. And this is exactly the case. I strongly support those voices which said that education is needed. I would add that not only education of pupils or teenagers, but also of adults. But this is not enough. And I strongly disagree with those who said that, disinformation has been here for ages. Yes, but this situation is new, and it's becoming revolutionary new with AI. What is new? In the last 200 years, in the modern societies, the way people connected outside of their village or district in the city was through organized media. Newspapers, radio, television, then internet, which was controlled because that was, the platforms edited. What happened in the last 15 years is that people connect with people. You can say it's democratic. And you can say the only change is that the filter of elites was removed. No, it is not the filter of elites. It is the filter of responsibility. Because contrary, I agree with probably 80% what Oana said, but not with this. And I say that as a former journalist as well. The threat that you can be sued for lying was important for the organized media. What we face now, and what is used by bad actors like Russia, is that you put disinformation or lie about something or somebody, and you will never be sued. And you will not be responsible for it. And here I come to my conclusion, which is, unless you will, and this is my total disagreement, to say diplomatically, with Mr. J.D. Vance, until you will have a leverage on X, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, where 95% plus lies are being spread, you will lose. And this is something which only we as European Union can do. I believe none of European governments will be able to do it. We must push big platforms to be responsible for their content, period. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Deputy Foreign Minister. Petra, in 3 minutes, how do we balance human rights, freedom of enterprise, and countering disinformation? Solution, real quick one, you got one?
No, I don't. Okay, we opened a TikTok profile this year. It's called Go See Talk. And our audience is not that large as it is of these malign actors. Why? Because we cannot get paid for this to be promoted. TikTok does not allow to promote it. In August, we received this email from Meta. I'm writing you to let you know that in the response to the European Union's transparency and targeting of political advertising regulation, Meta will no longer allow social issue, electoral or political ads in the EU starting in early October 2025. Oh, thank you, Meta. who are your owners? Yeah. So this means we will still be downgraded. Before the US elections, we are seeing numbers are decreasing on our posts. We are not gaining as much audience as we want, so we started to pay some important issues on Meta. It's not a large amount of money, 30 euros per week, and to hope to gain more people, to get more trust, as the other panelists mentioned. So it's really hard, and I don't have an answer or solution. I think that legislation that Europe is already doing with Digital Service Act is the right way, but it has to be done more.
I now know why our friend from Meta said he had a meeting suddenly, despite saying he was going to come to our panel yesterday.
Okay.
All right, now we know.
Maybe he's in the panelists, you know.
Yeah, we'll find him. We'll find him after this. All right, thank you so much to my colleagues from the government, but I want to pivot to our friends who are in civil society and academia, because as someone who's floated between those two worlds over the last years, I've always thought that civil society and academia were kind of a little bit more progressive and a little bit more advanced in identifying solutions, or at least having a more kind of broader and more accurate perception of what this whole problem set is, bringing in a more interdisciplinary approach, a more creative approach than perhaps we're afforded the opportunity to do within limited government institutions. So I want to ask, we're going to get into spicy questions now. So what do you guys feel that perhaps just hearing from our government colleagues that governments are focusing on that they shouldn't be? Where do you feel they're investing their efforts that are perhaps not as fruitful, or perhaps are even a misrepresentation or a misunderstanding of the problem? And where do you think they should be investing their efforts, particularly in areas that they don't? You know that I was coming to you first.
Well,
you're ready.
You're looking right at me.
At
so
you. Yeah.
Otherwise, I wouldn't assume. I mean, there's one crucial area. And that crucial area is strategic communications. For years now, government stakeholders have been asking us, what do we need to do to counter disinformation? And we give them a list, and then we tell them, but none of this is going to really work. All of this is indeed, as has been said, tactical. What you need to do first and foremost is get your story out there, and that's not in breach of any sort of freedom of speech. That is a parallel action. You don't spend time, and again, for political communicators, for politicians, that should be political communication 101. You don't allow your opponent to capture your agenda. You don't allow yourself to be prisoner to your opponent's agenda, who might throw things at you so that you have to react. You go out there and you promote your own agenda. That's something we haven't been doing. Governments, the EU, pro-democratic forces, we've been focusing on being reactive. We've been focusing on how we can counter what's happening instead of focusing on the actual cause. Why do people feel the emotional need? And I stress emotional because we are under the illusion that if we educate people to the end of the world, then we can get them to make more rational and more informed decisions. That's a big part of it. Of course, education is a must. It's a must generally in life, not just in that. But it's not going to solve the problem, because it's not that people are stupid or uneducated and that's why they buy into these narratives. It's because they have a need to belong. It's because they're angry. They don't feel represented by the by their elected politicians. So what we need to actually start from is, why do people feel that? How can we go out there, reach people, and stop making them feel that, and somehow provide what they actually need? So strategic communications is key, and it is harder to do than being reactive, but it's the one thing that works. And the other benefit of it is that to do that, you need a strategic communications architecture, which means you need to come up with more agile, more horizontal institutions that can react fast. Minister Bosacki was giving the example of disinformation in Poland. Yesterday, we had thousands of TikTok accounts in Romania spreading the news, which had been prepared over the past few weeks. that 3rd of September is the day that Romania was going to join the war in Ukraine. And Romanian men were going to be mobilized and sent to the front lines. And that has flooded the information space these days. To be able to respond quickly, because that's one bit where fact-checking is important. When a government official comes out and says, what you're seeing on social media is false, that needs really quick action before it becomes viral. Ideally, this should have been done weeks in advance. So to do that, you need that kind of architecture. And the last thing I'm going to say is that at the same time, let's not forget that we do have offline rules for elections campaigning, for protecting the information space, for protecting freedom of speech. We need to bring online and offline on the same level. I mean, you know, to be discussing how we might be encroaching upon somebody's freedom of speech, of course, that can happen. Of course, we have governments that would be very happy to do that in many places. But first and foremost, we haven't even implemented the legislation that would allow us to bring offline and online on the same level playing field when it comes to protecting people's freedom of access to information, not just freedom of speech, but freedom of access to information, where we don't need to check whether that information is true. We just need to check and let them know if that information is authentic, whether it's authentic or somehow manipulated. And then people can make up their own minds.
Perfect. Thank you. Alicia, would you like to respond that strategic communications is exactly what we need in 2 minutes or less?
Oh, man, 2 minutes or less? I've got so much to say. First of all, I'm not going to make a rebuttal about the history repeating itself, but I'm going to make a shameless plug for my book, The Information Animal. Read that. I'm not going to talk about strategic communications, but I do think that authoritarians have intuitively understood that the information environment, which does include the offline space, is a system. The Russians, long before the rest of us, had very good conceptual definitions of this and have acted accordingly. And in the US, the forces that have put Donald Trump in power, some of them have been systematically going around with a multi-pronged, long-term, decades-old approach to capturing education, media, technology, court systems at all levels. They know that it's not enough to just communicate. They're trying to shape the environment to win their aim. I think the problem with many policymakers trying to defend democracy is that they're missing the forest for the trees. They're not seeing that information ecosystem. And these things, it's dynamic, it's complex, I get it. They constantly change. Populations fluctuate. Skills change among adults over time, the tools change the outputs. These patterns exist, and they've existed since ancient Greece. And what happens is the new means, the new tools change how information is processed and distributed. It increases the volume, it increases the speed and distance at which it can travel. More people are engaged in the public sphere. This has happened over and over again, from Greece to England before the Civil War to now. And new ideas emerge that counter old ideas. And this leads to an information competition. And many democracies right now are in the midst of one of those. I think the focus on specific threats alone has led to seeking silver bullets or singular solutions to problems at the expense of seeing that system. I think it's also missed that disinformation is a symptom of wider underlying problems, like bad economy, like declining social services, like potential slips in education. I just gotta say that more money isn't necessarily gonna answer that. I mean, a few years ago, the Pentagon dropped nearly $1 billion in one company to counter misinformation. And look at where the US is right now. Yes, it was foreign disinformation, but still. Not having actual deeds follow the communications isn't going to bring 39% of Canadians who are dissatisfied with democracy back. It's not going to bring the 27% of Canadians who are open to an authoritarian ruler back into the fold. They need to see physical, real-world changes. I think, again, we can't really be strategic. Strategy, again, I'm a war studies person and I'm tripping over my words, but strategy really is about making the best options from an array of choices to achieve an aim. I've questioned what is our aim other than saving democracy. I'm not sure I see a vision that is actually going to entice people to come back. And we can't really be strategic if we don't understand our operating environment. If we don't even have a common definition of the information environment, we can't even see it. So I would say, And it's self-serving, yes, but the first thing that every country needs to do is baseline their national information ecosystem. We developed a framework with colleagues at the OECD and UNDP, among others, to do that. If you do that, you can understand or build a roadmap for who actually has to be at a whole-of-society approach. That word came up today. Again, talk about a concept that lacks good definitions, and most of it's coming from the government, top-down. That's hardly whole of society. We have to understand why people have turned away and what's going to bring them back, and that means really having the people in a ground-up way. So it has to go both ways. The third thing is, if you baseline your ecosystem, you can identify vulnerabilities. The vulnerabilities that aren't apparent or getting media attention like AI is. And it might be that your country is dependent on a satellite internet service provider or a social media platform. What I don't get is why our countries aren't coming together to invest in a comparable social media platform that offers a user experience and data portability to compete with the other ones. We're just talking about legislating, but we could invest in that. And I think lastly, if we do this together and build up enough case studies around these ecosystems, we can start to identify what constitutes resilience. Right now, we have absolutely no idea. When we say we want a healthy information ecosystem, it is based on guesses and values.
When you said it might be self-serving, but the first thing countries should do is, I was expecting you to say, is read my book. So I was hoping that would come through, and when it didn't, I'm going to say, I'm going to put a plug. Read Alicia's book, everyone. So I know we want to get to audience questions. So Damir, I just want to go to you real quickly in 2 minutes or so. This is something that's become a security challenge. It is being thought of as a security challenge, part of the hybrid threats toolkit. Do you feel that governments and civil society together are recognizing this for the security threat that it is, or are they overestimating its impact? And see if you can do it in 2 minutes.
You will tell me when it's 2 minutes.
Oh yeah, I make looks.
So I'll try to be very brief. I mentioned it in my first statement, actually, how this is with humanity from the start on, and it's going to be forever. Now the question is, of course, environment changed, technologies changed, and in the old times, it was basically spreading of disinformation was a domain of intelligence services, especially in totalitarian systems, also in democracies. And it was, we have also in the military so-called PSYOPs, psychological operations, which is basically the same. So we have a lot of euphemisms that were used in the past for these activities. So it's going to be with us for future. So what can we do about it? We discuss a lot of it. I think that the weakness, of course, of the democracy is our diversity, which is also the strength. But when you have on the other side authoritarian system with a clear agenda, and we are seeing now, and we didn't understand before, or actually even comprehend that we are going to have a hot war in European space in 2022. Nobody believed it's going to happen, and it did happen, and it's still ongoing. Aggression of Russia on Ukraine. Parallelly, we see intensification of these hybrid threats toward the European Union and our member states. And of course, the eastern flank is much more exposed probably than Slovenia. So this is going to be with us for the future. Is it a security threat? Of course it is. It's not a hot threat, but putting cracks into the society, quarreling among ourselves about things that are not important, of course, is an issue, and it's going to be an issue for the future. And of course, again, the quarreling is part of a society, and conflict is giving us a new added value. I can say also this. So, yes, I think that whole society approach and addressing the tech platforms, yes, this is one way forward. I know kids in the schools, they bring from their parents conspiracy theories in the 5th or 6th grade. How you are going to tackle this? I was involved in some project of radicalization of youth toward the extremism, EU-sponsored projects, a lot of them. And we were addressing also this kind of whole society approach. At the end of the day, it's about the parents to their children who are going to be the new spreaders of the fake news or truths. And I believe, yes, there are many truths, and we are not going to even find a compromise within democracy. What is the ultimate truth? There is the ultimate truth only in the authoritarian system. So we have to be open enough to understand this, and then address all these things that we discuss in the way also we discuss it today.
Perfect. Thank you, Damir. Right on time. So we have 4 minutes left, and I want to open the floor to questions. We want to make sure that our student workers have an opportunity to run around and stretch their legs by passing out the microphone. So please, if you have a question for any of our panelists.
Thank you very much. Alexandra Mamaeva, representative of People's Embassy of Belarus in Slovenia. On the previous days, I heard the idea to make a special ID to access to the internet. So it can help to counter anonymously bullying, bots, and so on. So what's your idea? If it's real, it can help? Maybe to Filip question. Thank you.
I think it would be great. You cannot harass people on the street because you don't have this, anonymity. You'll be identified, prosecuted. You'll go to jail for that. You can do it on the internet, though. It's not right. But we need to find a way to do it, protecting the freedom of people of being on the internet and expressing themselves freely. So we, as the EU, when we look at the problem, we don't focus only on FIMI being part of the information threats. It's not only that; it's a much broader question. That's why the regulation is so important, and the idea that you put forward is really worth exploring.
Katja.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, Filip, you haven't made me more optimistic, so sorry I have to say that, but I'll try to be very brief. So you mentioned that you don't want a ministry of truth. However, we do all realize government has a huge role because there is the truth, like Michaela mentioned. There was a Holocaust. There are elections. COVID does exist. There are things that are the truth, even though we are never going to have the totalitarian, yes, there's only one truth. We can all agree on that. But if we are under attack, and I believe we really are, from the outside, towards our values and our societies, then who is doing it right? Can you give me one positive example of somebody doing it right? Alicia, who is doing it right? Or anybody else? Thank you.
If it's me, I am not going to be giving you hope. I would say everybody says Finland is this shining example and people don't believe in disinformation. But if you take an ecosystem perspective, they are a very unique ecosystem. Very small country, very homogenous, very homogenous. They outrank so many other countries on levels of gender equality, pay equality, education, trust in media, trust in institutions. They're innovative with their libraries. The things they do are just so completely different. They have an existential threat on their doorstep that they have kept alive in the Winter War memory and many other things. Nothing of what they could probably do might apply to a country like the US or perhaps another country that's like very diverse like Canada. So I think this is my issue, is that if we haven't taken that ecosystem perspective and we don't actually know what it means to be strategic, how do we know who's doing best and why? Because we can't really study cause and effect.
Can I try to give you another example that's very different from the one that you gave? The Republic of Moldova. They're having elections at the end of this month. They had elections and a referendum for Europe last year. They are taking and they have taken an ecosystem approach. That's exactly the thing. They've been under tremendous Russian pressure, and the stakes for Russia go well beyond Moldova's borders. If Moldova makes it as a young democracy, imperfect as it may be, but still, and makes a pro-European choice, and that really travels, then Russia loses a lot of influence in its neighborhood, and that also sends a powerful signal to Ukraine. So the stakes for Russia are to make sure that Moldova does not manage to get any closer to the EU, and that trust in the political leadership in Moldova breaks down. And they set up a center for strategic communications. By the way, they're putting strategic communications at the center of this, so it's countering disinformation and strategic communications. They have been trying to go to the grassroots, including to the separatist communities in Gagauzia and Transnistria, not as successfully so far, and that's because politicians in the pro-European parties are having trouble going outside of their bubbles, and they're still not comfortable with communicating with people who are not like-minded, but steps have been taken. And they're fighting a fight that's very multifaceted. They go after networks that are proxy networks that focus on vote buying and sometimes through crypto. They are prosecuting more than 1,000 cases now after the elections last year. So they're trying to show that the justice system can deliver justice even under these circumstances, and so on and so forth. I mean, I won't go into all the details, but it's a very multifarious kind of approach. It is obviously, I mean, we're talking about Moldova. It's a country that used to be in the Russian sphere of influence. There are a lot of things that still need improvement, but so far, they've been able to make their choice freely. They've been able to protect elections and to still keep to the on the EU accession path that Georgia, for instance, through its government, not its society, has abandoned. So I think there's a lot that we can learn, not just from the more advanced countries, but also from those who are facing the more fierce attack.
Katya and I worked with the Moldovans closely, so we know that. I know that you want to have a real quick, Michaela. We have 1 minute.
I'll do it less. Okay. So I very much like that idea of the information ecosystem. It's the first time I hear it, but to me it sounds quite convincing. But I missed one element in the list that you gave to look into, and I think that's the algorithm. For me, TikTok not as TikTok is the problem, Netflix not as Netflix or Facebook is the problem. The problem is the algorithm, which brings you the information from the same field over and over and over again. And if you're once in a conspiracy environment, then you will get conspiracy information all the time. So for me, I think the algorithm is the problem. And the second thing I wanted to say is to the European Union. I'm a big fan of the European Union. I think you've been attacked here a lot. And I think at least the European Union does something. If it didn't do anything, the situation would be much worse.
Yeah.
Thank you for your work.
We're going to take Philip to lunch, so don't worry. He's going to be great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're going to get out of here. Thank you so much to our panelists.